Today we will going to learn the large intestine. Now, the large intestine extends from the ileocecal junction to the anus. It is about 1.5 meter long and is divided into the cecum, the ascending colon, the transverse colon, the descending colon, and the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and the anal canal. You can see in this diagram here everything is written. In the angle between the cecum and the terminal part of the ileum, there is a narrow diverticulum called the vermiform appendix. Now, we will first consider the general structure of the large intestine and then consider its parts one by one. The structure of the large intestine is adapted for storage of the matter reaching it from the small intestine and for absorption of fluid and the solids from it. The epithelium is absorptive, but the important thing is here the villi are absent. Adequate lubrication for passage of its contents is provided by numerous globate cells scattered in the crypts as well as on the surface of the mucous membrane. The presence of numerous solitary lymphatic follicles provides protection against bacteria present in the lumen of the intestine. Now, we will see the relevant features of the large intestine. The relevant features of the large intestine are as follows. Number 1, the large intestine is wider in caliber than the small intestine. The caliber is greatest at its commencement and gradually diminishes towards the rectum, where it is dilated to form the rectal ampulla just above the anal canal. Number 2, the greater part of the large intestine is fixed except for the appendix, the transverse colon and the sigmoid colon. Number 3, the longitudinal muscle coats forms only a thin layer in this part of the gut. The greater part of it forms three ribbon-like bands called the tenicoli. Proximally, the tini converge at the base of the appendix and distally they spread out on the terminal part of the sigmoid colon to become continuous with the longitudinal muscle coat of the rectum. In the cecum, the ascending colon and the descending colon, the positions of tinea are anterior or tinea libera, posterior or on tinea mucosa and posterolateral on tinea augmentalis. But in the transverse colon, the corresponding positions of tinea are inferior, posterior and superior. One tinea libera is placed anteriorly in the cecum, ascending, descending and sigmoid colon, but is placed inferiorly in the transverse colon. The second tinea mucomesocolica, is present on the posteromedial surface of cecum, ascending, descending and sigmoid colon, but is placed posteriorly on the transverse colon at the site of the attachment of the transverse mesocolon. And third one is tinea augmentalis. It's situated posterolaterally in cecum, ascending, descending and sigmoid colon, but is situated on the anterosuperior surface of transverse colon where layers 3 and 4 of greater omentum meet the transverse column. This change in position is due to twist in the transverse colon. You can see in this diagram where the twist is present. And number 4, since the tinea are shorter than the circular muscle cord, the colon is puckered and sacculated. You are looking, it is sacculated, that means it has wrinkles on its surface and inner side. Number 5, small bags of peritoneum filled with fat and called the appendices epiploiky are scattered over the surface of the large intestine except for the appendix, the cecum and the rectum. These are most numerous on the sides of the sigmoid colon and on the posterior surface of the transverse colon. Number 6, the blood supply to the colon is derived from the marginal artery. We can see in this figure where it is blood supply is seen. Terminal branches from the marginal artery are distributed to the intestine as long and short vessels, vasa longa and vasa brevia. Vasa longa means it's long vessel and vasa brevia means it is short vessel. The long arteries divide into the anterior and posterior branches close to the mesocolic tinea to pass between the serous and muscular cords and reach the amesocolic tinea. They gradually pierce the muscular cord and reach the submucosa. The anastomosis between the two amesocolic tinea is extremely poor. So, longitudinal incisions should be made along this line. Short branches arise either from the marginal artery or from the long branches, and the majority of them at once sink into the bowel wall at the mesocolic border. The short and the long branches together thus provide the mesocolic region of the wall with abundant blood supply. It is only the amesocolic region which has scanty blood supply. Subserous coat of long branches is intimately related to appendices epiploiky to which they contribute branches. During removal of these appendages, care must be taken not to pull on them in order to avoid traction on the subjacent vessel. Bowel wall is weakened where it is pierced by the vessels and at the sites of attachment of the appendices epiploiky. Mucosa may herniate in these situations, causing diverticulosis, which associated dangers of the diverticulitis, fibrosis and stricture. Number 7. Lymph from the large intestine passes through 4 sets of lymph nodes. Epicolic lymph node lying on the wall of the gut. Number 2. Paracolic nodes on the medial side of the ascending and descending colon and near the mesocolic border of the transverse and sigmoid colon. And number 3. Intermediate nodes on the main branches of the vessels and D-terminal nodes on the superior and inferior mesenteric vessels. Now, in carcinoma of the colon, the related paracolic and intermediate lymph nodes have to be removed. Their removal is possible only after the ligature of the main branch of the superior or inferior mesenteric artery along which the involved lymph nodes lie. It is necessary, therefore, to remove large segment of the bowel than is actually required by the extent of the disease in order to avoid gangrene as a result of interference with the blood supply. It is always wise to remove the whole portion of the bowel supplied by the ligated vessel. Now, number 8. The nerve supply of the large intestine bearing the lower half of the anal canal is both sympathetic and parasympathetic. The midgut territory receives its sympathetic supply from the celiac and superior mesenteric ganglia and its parasympathetic supply from the vagus. Both types of nerves are distributed to the gut through the superior mesenteric plexus. The hindgut territory receives its sympathetic supply from the lumbar sympathetic chain, that is L1 L2, and its parasympathetic chain supply from the pelvic splanchnic nerve, nervi arigentals, both via superior hypogastric and inferior mesenteric plexuses. Some parasympathetic fibers reach the colon along the posterior abdominal wall. The ultimate distribution of nerves in the gut is similar to that in the wall of the small intestine. The parasympathetic nerves are motor to the large intestine and inhibitory to the internal anal sphincter. The sympathetic nerves are largely vasomotor but also motor to the internal anal sphincter and inhibitory to colon. Pain impulses from the gut up to the descending colon travel through the sympathetic nerves and from the sigmoid colon and rectum through the pelvic splanchnic nerves. Now we will see the functions of the colon. The functions of the colon are number 1, lubrication of the feces by mucus. Number 2, absorption of the water, salts and other solutes. Number 3, Bacterial flora of the colon synthesizes vitamin B. Number 4. Mucoid secretion of the colon is rich in antibodies of immunoglobulin A group, which present it from invasion by microorganisms. Number 5. The microvilli, that is apical tuft of some columnar cells, serve a sensory function. Now, in the surface marking, we can see the cecum is marked in the right iliac fossa. It is about 6 cm long and 7.5 cm broad. Its axis is directed downwards and slightly medially. Now, ileocecal orifice or valve. Ileocecal orifice is marked on the point of the intersection of the right lateral and tubercular planes. And now appendix. You can see in the diagram the small structure appendix is written here. The appendicular orifice is marked at the point 2 cm below the ileocecal orifice. The appendix is marked by two parallel lines 1 cm apart and 7 to 10 cm long, extending from the appendicular orifice usually upwards behind the cecum. However, the position of the appendix is highly variable. Now, ascending colon. The ascending colon is marked by two parallel lines 5 cm apart immediately to the right of the right lateral vertical plane from the level of the transtubercular plane, that is upper end of the cecum, to the upper part of the ninth costal cartilage, that is right colic flexure. Now you can see transverse colon. The transverse colon is marked by two parallel lines 5 cm apart. It begins at the upper part of the ninth costal cartilage, that is right colic flexure, runs downwards and the medially to the umbilicus, and then upwards and laterally, crossing the transpyloric plane and also the left lateral vertical plane to end of the 8th costal cartilage, that is left colic flexure. Now descending colon. The descending colon is marked by two parallel lines 2.5 cm apart. It begins at the 8th costal cartilage, that is left colic flexure, runs downwards immediately lateral to the left lateral vertical plane and ends at the fold of the groin, that is inguinal ligament. Now we will see about the cecum. Yes, in this diagram you can see cecum. Cecum is a large blind sac forming the commencement of the large intestine. It is situated in the right iliac fossa above the lateral half of the inguinal ligament. It communicates superiorly with the ascending colon, medially at the level of the cecocolic junction with the ileum, and posteromedially with the appendix. You can see in this diagram. Now its dimensions are like this. It is 6 cm long and 7.5 cm broad. It is one of those organs of the body that have greater width than the length. The other examples are prostate, pons and pituitary. Now its relations. Anteriorly, coils of the intestine and anterior abdominal wall, and posteriorly muscles are right psoas iliacus, and nerves genitofemoral, femoral and lateral cutaneous nerve of the thigh, and vessels are testicular or ovarian and often the external iliac on the right side, and appendix in the retrocecal recess. Now we will see its types. There are types of the cecum. The cecum and appendix develop from the cecal bud arising from the post-arterial segment of the midgut loop. The proximal part of the bud dilates to form the cecum. The distal part remains narrow to form appendix. Thus, initially the appendix arises from the apex of the cecum. However, due to rapid growth of the lateral wall of the cecum, the attachment of the appendix shifts medially. Developmental arrest in the shift of the appendix forms the basis of the types of ceca. Number one is conical type. In this, appendix arises from the apex of the cecum. Intermediate type, where the right and left cecal pouches are equal in size and the appendix arises from the depression between them. Okay, afterward we will see this in diagram, and we will see now morphology of the cecum. Number one, cecum is longer in herbivorous animal and smaller in carnivores. Number two, cecum bears inverse relation with stomach. Ruminants have a simple cecum but a complex stomach. The horse has a complex cecum but simple stomach. Iliac position of the cecum is related to the upright posture of the man. Now we will see vessels and nerves. The arterial supply of the cecum is derived from the cecal branches of the ileocolic artery. You can see here. The veins drain into the superior mesenteric vein. The nerve supply is same as that of the midgut. That is thoracic 11 to lumbar 1 parasympathetic vagus. In clinical anatomy, we can see cecum is commonly involved in amoebiasis, causing amoebic dysentery, and number 2, intestinal tuberculosis, that is ileocecal tuberculosis, and number 3, carcinoma. Inflammation of the cecum is known as cystitis or nephritis. Now we will see the structures, wall के structures. Number 1, ileocecal wall. The name itself suggests where it is located. Ileocecal. The lower end of the ileum opens on the posterior medial aspect of the cecocolic junction. The ileocecal opening is guarded by the ileocecal wall. The wall has 2 lips and 2 frenula. The upper lip is horizontal and lies at the ileocolic junction. The lower lip is longer and concave and lies at the ileocecal junction. The 2 frenula are formed by the fusion of the lips at the end of the aperture. These are the left or anterior and the right or posterior frenula. The left end of the aperture is rounded and the right end narrow and pointed. Now we will see its control and mechanism. The wall is actively closed by sympathetic nerves which cause tonic contraction of the ileocecal sphincter. And number 2, it is mechanically closed by the distension of the cecum. Now we will see its function. Number 1, it prevents reflux from cecum to ileum, and number 2, it regulates the passage of ileal contents into the cecum and prevents them from the passing too quickly. Now we will see the vermiform appendix. Here number 2, in this figure number 2 is for appendix. This is a worm-like diverticulum arising from the posteromedial wall of the cecum, about 2 cm below the ileocecal orifice. Now, the dimensions are like this. The length varies from 2 to 20 cm with an average of 9 cm. It is longer in children than in adults. The diameter is about 5 mm. The lumen is quite narrow and may be obliterated after mid-adult life. Now, its position. The appendix lies in the right iliac fossa. Although the base of the appendix is fixed, the tip can point in any direction. There are in clock we can see up to 12 o'clock it is retrocolic. In clock number 2 position is planing, number 3 At 3 o'clock position it is promontory. It is 4 o'clock position it is pelvic. It is, if it is on 6 o'clock position then it is subcecal. If it is 11 o'clock position then it is paracolic. The appendix may pass upwards to the right, that is paracolic. It may lie behind cecum and colon, known as retrocecal. It means near about 12 o'clock position. This is the commonest position of the appendix. Near about 65% persons have appendix in 12 o'clock position. The appendix may pass upwards to the left. It points towards the spleen. This is the splenic or 2 o'clock position. The appendix may lie in front of the ileum, that is pre-ileal, or behind the ileum, that is post-ileal. It may pass horizontally to the left as if pointing to the sacral promontory, called promontoric or 3 o'clock position. Number 5, it may descend up to into the pelvic, called pelvic or 4 o'clock position. This is the second most position about in 30% persons. And number 6, it may lie below the cecum, that is subcecal, and may point towards the inguinal ligament called as mid-inguinal or 6 o'clock position. Now we will see the appendicular orifice. The appendicular situated on the posteromedial aspect of the cecum 2 cm below the ileocecal orifice. The appendicular orifice is occasionally guarded by an indistinct semilunar fold of mucous membrane known as wall of Golgi. The orifice is marked on the surface by a point situated 2 cm below the junction of the transtubercular and right lateral planes. And McBurney's point is the site of maximum tenderness in appendicitis. The point lies at the junction of lateral 1/3 and medial 2/3 of the line joining the right anterior superior iliac spine to the umbilicus. We can see in this diagram. You can see here. In this diagram you can see. Now we will see its blood supply, appendicular blood supply. Appendicular artery is a branch of the lower division of the ileocolic artery. It runs behind the terminal part of the ileum and enters the mesoappendix at a short distance from its base. Here it gives a recurrent branch which anastomoses with a branch of the posterior cecal artery. The main artery runs towards the tip of the appendix, lying at first near to and then in the free border of the mesoappendix. The terminal part of the artery lies actually on the wall of the appendix. Now we will see detail about the parts of the colon. Now we will see ascending colon. Ascending colon is about 12.5 centimeter long. You can see in this diagram where is ascending colon is written, and extends from the cecum to the inferior surface of the right lobe of the liver. Here it bends to the left to form the right colic flexure. Usually it is retroperitoneal. Rarely it may possesses an ascending mesocolon. Anteriorly it is related to the coils of the small intestine, the right edge of the greater omentum, and the anterior abdominal wall. Posteriorly it is related to the iliacus, the iliolumbar ligament, the quadratus lumborum, the transversus abdominis, the diaphragm at the tip of the last rib, the lateral cutaneous ilioinguinal and iliohypogastric nerves, the iliac branches of the iliolumbar vessels, the fourth lumbar artery, and the right kidney. Now transverse colon. The transverse colon is about 50 centimeter long and extend across the abdomen from the right colic flexure to the left colic flexure. Actually, it is not transverse but hangs low as a loop to a variable extent, sometimes reaching to the pelvis. It is suspended by the transverse mesocolon attached to the anterior border of pancreas and has a wide range of mobility. Anteriorly, it is related to the greater omentum and the anterior abdominal wall. Posteriorly, it is related to the second part of the duodenum, the head of the pancreas, and two coils of the small intestine. Now, splenic flexure. The left colic flexure lies at the junction of the transverse colon and the descending colon. Here, the colon bends downwards and backwards. The flexure lies on the lower part of the left kidney and diaphragm, behind the stomach and below the anterior end of the spleen. The flexure is attached to the 11th rib by a horizontal fold of peritoneum called the phrenicocholic ligament. This ligament supports the spleen and forms a partial upper limit of the left paracolic gutter. Now we will see descending colon. Descending colon is about 25 cm long and extends from the left colic flexure to the sigmoid colon. It runs vertically up to the iliac crest and then inclines medially on the iliacus and psoas major to reach the pelvic brim, where it is continuous with the sigmoid colon. The descending colon is narrower than the ascending colon. Usually it is retroperitoneal. Rarely it may possess a descending mesocolon. Anteriorly it is related to the coils of the small intestine. Posteriorly it is related to the transverse abdominis and the quadratus lumborum, the iliacus and psoas muscles, the iliohypogastric, ilioinguinal, lateral cutaneous, femoral and genitofemoral nerves, iliac branches of the iliolumbar vessel and the testicular and external iliac vessels. Now we will see about the sigmoid colon. Sigmoid colon. Sigmoid colon is about 37.5 cm long and extends from the pelvic brim to the third piece of the sacrum, where it becomes the rectum. It forms a sinus loop and hangs down in the pelvic over the bladder and uterus. Occasionally it is very short and takes a straight course. It is suspended by the sigmoid mesocolon and is covered by the coils of the small intestine. The rectum in the anal canal, we will describe it later. Now we will see the histology of the colon. Mucous membrane. It shows only invaginations to form deep crypts of Lieberkühn lining epithelium is of columnar cells with intervening lobate cells. Muscularis mucosa is well defined and submucosa contains solitary lymphoid follicles with the Meissner's plexus of nerve. Muscularis externa, outer longitudinal coat is thickened at 3 places to form tinea coli. Inner coat is of circular fibers. Outermost layer is serous or adventitia. Now we will see clinical anatomy of appendix. Inflammation of the appendix is known as appendicitis. In this condition, it is usually necessary to remove appendix. The operation for removal of the appendix is called as appendicectomy. Some anatomical facts relevant to the diagnosis and treatment of appendicitis are as follows. We will see. Number 1. Pain caused by appendicitis is first felt in the region of the umbilicus. This is referred pain. We can say it is referred pain. Note the fact that both the appendix and the umbilicus are innervated by segment T10 of the spinal cord. Appendix by sympathetic fibers and umbilicus by somatic fibers. With increasing inflammation, pain is felt in the right iliac fossa. This is caused by the involvement of the parietal peritoneum of the region. Remember that parietal peritoneum is sensitive to pain, but visceral peritoneum is not. Now, number 2, McBurney's point. McBurney's point is the site of maximum tenderness in appendicitis. The point lies at the junction of the lateral 1/3 and the medial 2/3 of the line joining the umbilicus to the right anterior superior iliac spine. It corresponds roughly to the position for the base of the appendix. Previously, we seen it in the diagram. Examination of the case of acute appendicitis reveals following physical signs. Number 1, hyperasthenia. Aesthesia is the right iliac, in the right iliac fossa. Number 2, tenderness at McBurney's point. And number 3, muscle guard and rebound tenderness over the appendix. Number 3, when the appendix is retrocecal, extension of the hip joint may cause pain because the appendix is disturbed by the stretching of the psoas major muscle. Number 4, in pelvic appendicitis, pain may be felt when the thigh is flexed and medially rotated because the obturator internus is stretched. Appendicular dyspepsia, that is chronic appendicitis produces dyspepsia resembling disease of stomach, duodenum or gallbladder. It is due to passage of infected lymph to the subpyloric nodes which cause irritation of pylorus, and there is history of earlier acute appendicitis.